He walked into the bakery to order a wedding cake for another woman. He never expected to see the face of the wife he abandoned 5 years ago. He definitely never expected the little girl gripping her hand. The glass door chimed as Kang Minjae pushed it open, and the scent of vanilla and warm sugar hit him immediately. He paused, one polished Italian leather shoe inside the bakery, the other still on the sidewalk outside. His security detail waited by the black armored sedan, confused. In 12 years of running the Kang crime family's operations across 3 continents, Minjae had never personally chosen anything for his weddings, his galas, his family events. But today, something had pulled him here to this small neighborhood bakery in Itaewon. Something he couldn't name. Some instinct that whispered he needed to see this place himself, not send an underling. The bakery was small. Too small for a man who controlled territories from Seoul to San Francisco, who had politicians and police chiefs on his payroll, whose name made hardened criminals bow their heads in respect. The walls were cream-colored, lined with photos of smiling customers and handwritten thank you notes. A chalkboard menu hung crookedly near the register, listing items in both Korean and English. Classical music played softly from a speaker somewhere. Vivaldi maybe, gentle and utterly at odds with the violence that followed Minjae like a shadow. And then he saw her. She stood behind the counter, her back to him, tying an apron around her waist. Her hair was pulled into a simple bun, shorter than he remembered, the thick black curls he used to wrap around his fingers now barely touching her shoulders. Her skin, deep and rich like polished mahogany, caught the afternoon light streaming through the window. American, from Brooklyn originally, though she'd learned Korean fluently during their marriage. She turned, reaching for something on the shelf behind the counter. And Minji's breath stopped. Diane. She hadn't noticed him yet. She was humming, completely absorbed in arranging pastries in the display case, her movements practiced and efficient. She looked older, not in a bad way, but in a way that suggested she'd lived through things, survived things. Minji's hand tightened on the door handle until his knuckles went white. 5 years. It had been 5 years since she'd walked out of his life without explanation, without a forwarding address, without a single word. After the divorce papers arrived at his office, signed and notarized, delivered by a lawyer whose name he'd never heard before, she'd simply vanished. He'd used every resource at his disposal to find her. Every connection, every informant, every technology his organization possessed. Nothing. She'd disappeared more thoroughly than people who entered witness protection, more completely than targets his family had buried in the mountains. He should leave. He should turn around, get back in the car, and have his consigliera order the wedding cake online like a normal person in his position would. But his feet wouldn't move. Then Diane looked up. Their eyes met across the small space, and Minjae watched the color drain from her face. The small notepad in her hand slipped, hitting the counter with a soft thud. For 3 seconds, neither of them moved. Neither of them breathed. Minjae, she whispered, his name a ghost on her lips. Before he could respond, before he could form words around the shock lodged in his throat like a knife, a child's laughter rang out from the back room. Small feet pounded against the floor, and a little girl burst through the doorway behind the counter, her pigtails bouncing as she ran. "Mommy, Mommy, I finished the drawing." The child clutched a piece of paper covered in crayon marks, her face bright with pride. She couldn't have been more than 4 years old, maybe 5. She wore a yellow dress with white flowers, and her skin was a beautiful blend, lighter than Diane's, but carrying the same warm undertones. but it was her eyes that made Minjae's world tilt violently on its axis. Almond-shaped, dark, unmistakably Korean, unmistakably his. The little girl stopped when she noticed the stranger in her mother's bakery. She pressed closer to Diane's leg, suddenly shy, peeking out at Minjae with curious eyes that reflected his own face back at him. "Lena, sweetheart, go back to the playroom for just a moment, okay?" Diane's voice was steady, but Minjae heard the tremor underneath. He'd always been able to hear it, even when she tried to hide her fear, her hurt, her anger. "But I wanted to show you. I'll come see it in just a minute. I promise." Diane's hand shook as she smoothed her daughter's hair. "Go on now." Lena obeyed, but not before glancing back at Minjae one more time. Something in her expression, a tilt of her head, a curiosity in her gaze, was so familiar it hurt. It was him. It was undeniably him. The door to the back room closed. The classical music continued playing. Outside, a car honked, life continuing as if the world hadn't just fundamentally changed. And Minjae stood frozen in the small bakery, staring at the woman he'd loved and lost, knowing that everything he thought he understood about the past 5 years had just shattered like glass under a hammer. "How long were you going to keep this from me?" His voice came out barely above a whisper, rough with emotion he rarely allowed himself to feel. Diane's jaw tightened. She picked up the notepad she'd dropped, her movements careful and controlled, the way someone moves when they're trying very hard not to fall apart. "You need to leave. That child, you need to leave, Minjae." Her voice was stronger now, but he saw her hand shaking as she gripped the counter. "You have no right to come in here." "No right." The words exploded from him, louder than he'd intended. Years of discipline, of maintaining perfect control in every negotiation, every crisis, every execution, it all evaporated. "I have a daughter, and you never told me." "Lower your voice." Diane's eyes flashed, and there was the fire he remembered, the strength that had first drawn him to her at that international business summit 7 years ago. She'd been consulting on supply chain ethics, of all things, and had stood up during his presentation to challenge his family's shipping practices in front of 200 executives. She'd made him rethink his entire approach to legitimate business fronts. She'd made him want to be better than the violence and corruption he'd inherited. "This is my place of business," she continued, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. "And you will not cause a scene." "A scene?" Minjae laughed, a harsh sound that hurt his own throat. "You disappeared. You left me with papers and silence, and now I find out I have a—" He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. The enormity of it was crushing him, pressing down on his chest until he couldn't breathe properly. Diane set down the notepad very carefully, like it was made of crystal. When she looked at him again, her eyes were dry but hard as diamonds. "You want to do this now? Fine. But not here. Not where she can hear." "When then?" "Another 5 years. The bakery closed at 6 o'clock. Come to the back entrance at 6:30. She turned away, busying herself with rearranging pastries that didn't need rearranging. "And Minjae, come alone. No security, no assistant, no representatives from your mother's office." The mention of his mother landed like a physical blow. Minji's hands clenched into fists at his sides, the dragon tattoo on his forearm, symbol of his rank in the family, flexing with the movement. "My mother has nothing to do with." 6:30. Diane's voice was final, brooking no argument. "Or don't come at all." Minjae stood there for a moment longer, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his temples, in his throat, behind his eyes. Through the window to the back room, He could see a flash of yellow, Lena's dress, as she moved around, probably playing, completely unaware that her entire world was about to change. His daughter. He had a daughter, and she didn't even know who he was. He turned and walked out of the bakery, the chime above the door sounding obscenely cheerful, mocking him. His security chief straightened as Minjae approached the car, concern flickering across his professionally neutral expression. "Sir, the cake order." "Drive." Minji's voice was flat, empty. "Just drive." As the car pulled away from the curb, Minjae looked back through the tinted window. Diane stood in the bakery doorway, arms wrapped around herself, watching him leave. Even from this distance, even through the bulletproof glass, he could see the rigid set of her shoulders, the way she held herself like she was barely keeping it together. He'd seen her stand like that once before, the day she'd left him. The car merged into Seoul's afternoon traffic, and Minjae leaned his head back against the leather seat, closing his eyes. His mind was racing, fragments of memory colliding with the present, trying to calculate, to understand, to process what couldn't be processed. 4 years old, maybe 5, which meant Diane had been pregnant when she left. Pregnant when his mother had called her into that private conference room at the family's headquarters. Pregnant when the accusations had started flying. Corporate espionage, betrayal, selling family secrets to rival organizations. Pregnant when the evidence had been presented, security footage that showed Diane accessing files she swore she'd never touched, communication records that supposedly proved she'd been passing information to the Choi family, their bitterest rivals. Pregnant when the family council had demanded her removal from Minji's life as a condition of his continued leadership. Pregnant when Minjae had stood in his corner office, looking down at the divorce papers she'd signed without contest, telling himself she must have been guilty all along. Because if she truly loved him, she would have fought harder. Because her silence was proof of her betrayal. Because it was easier to believe she'd used him than to face the possibility that his own family had destroyed the only real thing in his life. His phone buzzed. The 10th message from his fiancée, Park Seo-yeon. The wedding was in 3 weeks. The guest list numbered 437, including executives from every major corporation in Seoul, 3 members of the National Assembly, and 2 cabinet ministers who were on the Kang family's payroll. The merger between his organization and her father's pharmaceutical empire, legitimate on the surface, money laundering underneath, had already been announced. Stock prices had risen. Territories had been redrawn. Alliances had shifted. Minjae looked at the screen, at Seo-yeon's name, and felt nothing. He'd felt nothing when he proposed 6 months ago, the ring his mother had selected weighing heavy in his pocket. Nothing when they'd posed for engagement photos, his arm around a woman who looked at him like he was a business transaction. Nothing when she'd shown him fabric samples for the reception hall, color schemes that meant nothing, flowers he couldn't name. His mother had arranged everything, as she always did. And he'd agreed, as he always did, because it made sense. Because marriage to Seo-yeon meant stability, expansion, power. Because Diane was gone, and he'd taught himself not to feel anything at all. But now, "Sir," his driver's voice interrupted the spiral of his thoughts. "Where should I take you?" Minjae opened his eyes. The afternoon stretched ahead, full of meetings he needed to cancel, calls he needed to make, lies he needed to maintain. But first, he needed answers. He needed to understand how the woman he'd married, the woman he'd loved with an intensity that had frightened him, the woman who'd walked away without explanation, how she'd been carrying his child the entire time. The office, he said finally, his voice steady despite the chaos in his chest. "And clear my schedule for tonight." His security chief shifted in the front passenger seat. "Sir, you have the charity gala at 8. Your mother specifically requested." "Clear it." Minjae's tone left no room for argument, carrying the weight of authority he'd earned through blood and ruthlessness. "Tell them I'm ill. Tell them whatever you need to. But my evening is not available." He had 6 hours until 6:30. 6 hours to prepare for a conversation that terrified him more than any rival gang, any police investigation, any threat to his power. 6 hours until he had to face the truth about what he'd lost, and what he might have just found. The afternoon crawled by with excruciating slowness. Minjae sat in his office on the 48th floor, soul spread out beneath him like a kingdom he'd conquered through strategy and violence. He'd built this empire. Every connection, every territory, every legitimate business front that hid the family's real operations. He'd sacrificed everything for this view, this power, this legacy. Everything except the one thing that had actually mattered. His assistant knocked softly, a woman in her 50s who'd worked for his father before the old man's heart attack had put Minjae in charge. "Sir, Mrs. Kang is on line 1. Minjae's jaw tightened. His mother. Of course she'd heard about the canceled gala. Nothing happened in his life without her knowledge, her input, her iron control. "Tell her I'll call her back. She's been quite insistent, sir. This is her 4th. I said I'll call her back." Minjae's voice was sharp enough that his assistant bowed quickly and retreated, closing the heavy door behind her. He turned his chair to face the window, his reflection ghosting in the glass. Somewhere out there, in a small bakery in a neighborhood he'd never had reason to visit, his daughter was playing, drawing pictures, living a life he knew nothing about. His phone buzzed again. Not Seo-yeon this time, but his mother calling directly. He declined it. She called again immediately. And again. On the 4th call, he answered. "Where are you?" His mother's voice was crisp, controlled, imperious in the way only a woman who'd built a criminal empire alongside her husband could be. "The gala is in 3 hours, and Seo-yeon's mother is calling me in a panic because you've canceled all your appointments and your assistant won't explain why. I'm taking the evening for personal matters." A pause. When his mother spoke again, her voice had dropped to that dangerous quiet he knew well, the tone that preceded violence. "What personal matters could possibly be more important than your obligations? The merger announcement is next week. Every major player in Seoul will be at this gala. Your absence will be noted, Minjae. It will raise questions. Let them ask questions." "Excuse me." Minjae stood, pacing to the window. Far below, people moved through the streets like ants, everyone going somewhere, everyone with a purpose. None of them knowing that the man who controlled half the city's underground operations was falling apart 48 floors above them. "I said, let them ask questions. I'm not attending tonight. This is unacceptable. Whatever childish rebellion you think you're staging." I saw Diane today. The silence on the other end was absolute, thick and heavy as fog. Minjae could picture his mother in her sitting room, the same room where she'd told him 5 years ago that Diane was a liability, a scandal waiting to happen, a mistake that needed to be corrected before it destroyed everything the Kang family had built. When she finally spoke, her voice was ice. "That woman has no place in your life anymore. Whatever she wants, whatever scheme she's running. She has a child." Minjae's reflection stared back at him from the window, his face pale beneath his naturally tanned skin. A daughter, for maybe 5 years old. Another pause, longer this time. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm telling you I have a daughter I never knew about. Don't be ridiculous. His mother's composure never cracked, trained through decades of maintaining power in a world that tried to destroy women who reached for it. You have no proof the child is yours. This is clearly a ploy for money, for she has my eyes, mother. Minji's voice cracked despite his best efforts. My exact eyes. Diane was pregnant when she left. When you accused her of espionage. When you made her sign those papers. I saved your career. The words came fast now, heated. I saved this family from a scandal that would have destroyed everything your father built. You destroyed my marriage. I saved you from a disastrous mistake. His mother's composure finally broke, fury bleeding through. That woman was never appropriate for this family, for your position. A foreigner with no connections, no understanding of our world, no respect for our traditions. She would have ruined you. So you ruined her instead. I protected you, as I always have, as I always will. His mother's breathing was sharp now, controlled fury barely contained. And if this child exists, if by some chance she is biologically related to you, it changes nothing. You have a wedding in 3 weeks to a woman who is actually suited to be your wife. You have responsibilities, obligations. I have a daughter. Minjae closed his eyes, the weight of it pressing down on him like the ocean. And I'm going to meet her properly tonight. If you pursue this, if you acknowledge this child, you will lose everything. His mother's voice turned cold, calculated, the voice she used when ordering executions. The council will never accept it. Seo Yun's family will pull out of the merger. Your position as head of the family will be questioned. Your reputation, my reputation. Minjae laughed, the sound bitter as poison. 5 years ago, I let you convince me that my reputation mattered more than the truth. That family stability mattered more than the woman I loved. I'm not making that mistake again. You're not thinking clearly. You're emotional. I'm done with this conversation, mother. He'd never interrupted her before, never in his entire life. I'll see you when I see you. He ended the call before she could respond, his hands shaking with adrenaline and fear and something that might have been liberation. In 36 years, he'd never hung up on his mother, never directly defied her, never challenged the power she held over him, over the family, over every aspect of his life. It had always been absolute. Until now. Until he'd seen Lena's eyes looking up at him from behind Diane's leg. At 6:15, Minji's driver dropped him 2 blocks from the bakery. He walked the rest of the way, his coat collar turned up against the evening chill, his security detail under strict orders to stay with the car. The streets here were quieter than the commercial district where his office stood, where deals were made and blood was occasionally spilled in back alleys. Small shops lined the sidewalk, a bookstore, a flower shop, a restaurant with handwritten specials in the window. The kind of neighborhood where a person could disappear, could build a life away from the violence and the spotlight. The bakery's main entrance was dark, the closed sign facing out. Minjae walked around to the alley behind the building, where trash bins sat next to a single steel door. A light glowed above it, warm and yellow. He knocked. The door opened immediately, as if Diane had been waiting on the other side. She'd changed out of her apron into jeans and a simple sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. Now she looked tired, beautiful and tired and guarded in a way that made Minji's chest ache with everything they'd lost. "Come in," she said quietly, stepping aside. The back room of the bakery was small, clearly serving as both storage and Lena's play area. Boxes of supplies were stacked against one wall, but the other side held a small table with coloring books, a bin of toys, and children's drawings taped to the wall in a cheerful riot of color. Minjae recognized the yellow dress from earlier, hanging on a hook near the door. "She's with a friend tonight," Diane said, following his gaze. "I thought it would be better if we talked alone first." Minjae nodded, not trusting his voice. Now that he was here, now that Diane stood 3 feet away from him in the place she'd built without him, he didn't know where to start. There were too many questions, too much silence to break through, too many years of lies and half-truths. Diane moved to a small counter with a coffee maker. "Do you still drink it black?" "Yes." She poured 2 cups, handed him one. Her fingers didn't touch his, but he caught her scent, vanilla and sugar and something else, something that was just Diane, and the memories hit him so hard, he had to set the cup down before he dropped it. "When?" he asked, the word coming out rough. "When did you know?" Diane leaned against the counter, both hands wrapped around her coffee mug like she needed its warmth. "I found out 3 days after your mother called me into her office. 3 days after I signed the divorce papers." 3 days. Minjae felt his knees weaken. "You didn't tell me. Why didn't you? How could I?" Diane's voice was steady, but her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Your mother made it very clear what would happen if I stayed in your life. She showed me the fabricated evidence. She showed me how easily she could destroy my name, my career, any chance I had at a normal life." She paused, swallowing hard. "And then she told me that if I was carrying your child, she would make sure that child never had a future in this country. She threatened our baby." The words came out strangled, barely human. "She said she would ensure any child I had with you would be labeled illegitimate, would be barred from the family, would never be acknowledged by the Kangs." Diane's voice finally broke, tears spilling over. "She said she would use her influence to make sure no good school would accept her, that no reputable company would hire her when she grew up, that the scandal of your divorce and my betrayal would follow her forever." She set down her coffee cup with shaking hands. "She said the only way to protect your child was to disappear, to let you believe there was no child at all." Minjae sank into one of the small chairs at the children's table, his head in his hands, the dragon tattoo on his forearm seeming to mock him with its symbol of strength and power. What good was power when he couldn't protect the people who mattered? "I would have protected you," he said, the words hollow even to his own ears. "Both of you." "No, you wouldn't have." Diane's words were soft but certain, devastatingly honest. "You would have tried, Minjae, but you couldn't even protect me when it was just accusations. When your mother showed you that fake security footage, when the council demanded my removal, you believed them over me. I asked you to explain, to defend yourself. You asked me once." Diane's voice was quiet but firm. "One conversation in your office with your mother's lawyer present. And when I couldn't prove a negative, when I couldn't prove I hadn't done something I'd never done, you accepted their version of events." She sat down across from him, her hands folded on the small table decorated with crayon marks. "You chose them over me. What made you think you'd choose differently when it came to our child?" The truth of it was crushing, pressing down on Minjae until he could barely breathe. He remembered that day, that conversation. He remembered the doubt that had crept in when Diane couldn't provide an alibi for every minute the files had allegedly been accessed. He remembered his mother's calm, reasonable voice pointing out that love could blind a person, that sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who betray us, that a leader who can't make hard decisions isn't fit to lead. He'd wanted Diane to fight harder, to rage, to demand, to refuse to leave until she'd cleared her name. Instead, she'd gone quiet. She'd signed the papers his mother's lawyers put in front of her. She'd walked out of his life without looking back. And he'd let her go. I was pregnant, alone, and terrified. Diane continued, her voice steadier now, like she'd practiced this speech in her mind 1,000 times. Your mother had made it clear she had the power and the will to ruin both of us. So I took what money I'd saved, I left Seoul, and I built a life where Lena would be safe, where she could grow up without the shadow of the Kang family hanging over her. For 5 years. Minjae looked up at her, his eyes burning. For 5 years you've been raising our daughter alone. Yes. Why did you come back to Seoul? The question came out desperate. If you were safe somewhere else, why come back? I didn't want to. Diane's expression softened slightly. But my mother got sick last year. Cancer. She lives 20 minutes from here. I needed to be close to take care of her. And Lena. She paused, something like a smile touching her lips. Lena deserves to know her grandmother. The one grandmother who actually wants to know her. The barb landed. Minjae absorbed it without flinching. What have you told Lena about me? That her father is a busy man who lives far away. That sometimes adults make complicated choices. Diane pulled at a loose thread on her sweater. She's 4 years old, Minjae. She asks sometimes, but she doesn't really understand yet what it means not to have a father around. I want to know her. The words came out desperate, raw. I want to be part of her life. Why? Diane's eyes were hard now, protective. Because she's yours? Because your pride is wounded that I kept her from you? Because she's my daughter. Minji's voice rose despite his best efforts to stay calm. Because I've lost 5 years already, and I don't want to lose any more. Because. And what about your wedding? Diane leaned forward. Your fiancé? Your mother's plans for your perfect merger marriage? Lena isn't a secret you can keep, Minjae. If you acknowledge her, if you're part of her life, everyone will know. Your mother, your council, every media outlet in Seoul. They'll dig into why I left. They'll find the accusations. They'll. Let them. Minjae stood, the small chair scraping against the floor. Let them dig. Let them ask questions. I don't care anymore. You don't care. Diane stood too, her voice rising to match his. You didn't care 5 years ago when it mattered. You didn't care when I needed you to believe in me, to stand up to your mother, to choose our marriage over your position. But now that there's a child you can claim, now you suddenly don't care what they think. I was wrong. The admission tore out of him, ripping something vital in his chest. I was wrong 5 years ago. I was a coward who valued control over trust, who believed lies because they were easier than facing the truth. I let my mother manipulate me. I let the council intimidate me. I let you walk away because some part of me was too proud to fight for you. His voice dropped to a whisper, and I have regretted it every single day since. Diane's breath caught, tears spilling over, running down her cheeks in tracks that caught the fluorescent light. Do you know what it was like? Do you know what it was like to love you so much it physically hurt, to carry your child inside me, to know I'd never see you again? To tell our daughter bedtime stories about a prince who lived in a castle far away, knowing she'd probably never meet him? Then let me meet her now. Minjae stepped closer, his hands aching to reach for her, but not daring to cross that line. Let me try to be the father she deserves. Let me. And when your mother threatens her again? Diane's voice cracked, raw with pain and fear. When the council demands you choose between your daughter and your position. When Seo-yun's family pulls out of the merger and your territories start falling to rivals and your investors start asking questions. What will you choose then, Minjae? Will you choose Lena? Or will you choose the same things you chose 5 years ago? The question hung between them, heavy and terrible. Through the wall, Minjae could hear the hum of the refrigerator units, the distant sound of traffic, the pulse of a city that didn't care about his crisis. The drawings on the wall seemed to mock him. All those moments he'd missed, all those firsts he hadn't been there for. I'll choose her, he said finally, the words feeling like an oath. Whatever it costs, whatever I have to give up, I'll choose her. You don't know what you're saying. Diane shook her head. You don't know what you'd be giving up. I know I've already given up 5 years. I know I've missed her first steps, her first words, for birthdays, countless bedtimes. Minji's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I know I have a wedding scheduled to a woman I don't love because it makes good business sense. I know my entire life is built on compromises and calculations and sacrifices. He met her eyes, and none of it means anything. None of it has ever meant anything without you. Diane closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they were red but steady. I can't trust you with her heart, Minjae. I can't trust you not to hurt her the way you hurt me. Then don't trust me. Not yet. He took another step closer. But let me try. Let me prove to you that I can be the man I should have been 5 years ago. And your wedding? There won't be a wedding. Your mother. My mother doesn't control my life anymore. Minjae pulled out his phone, pulled up his messages with hands that shook slightly. Without hesitating, without letting himself think about the consequences, he typed a message to Seo-yeon. Asterisk, I'm sorry. I can't marry you. The wedding is canceled. Asterisk. He hit send before he could second guess it. There. He showed Diane the screen. It's done. Diane stared at him, her eyes wide. You just canceled your wedding by text message. Seo-yeon doesn't love me. She loves the idea of the merger, the social status, the power that comes with being my wife. His phone immediately started buzzing with calls. He silenced it. She'll be angry about the embarrassment, but she won't be heartbroken. His voice softened. The only woman whose heart I ever broke was yours. And I'm asking for the chance to make it right. This is insane. Diane's hands came up to her face. You're throwing away everything on a chance. On a maybe. I'm choosing my daughter. Minji's voice was steady now, certain. I'm choosing the possibility of being her father. If that's insane, then I don't want to be sane. Diane turned away, her shoulders shaking. Minjae wanted to reach for her, to comfort her, but he'd lost that right years ago. So he stood there, watching her cry, letting the weight of everything they'd lost fill the small room. She likes strawberries, Diane said finally, her voice thick with tears. She's allergic to shellfish. She has nightmares sometimes about monsters under her bed, and the only thing that helps is when I sing to her. She turned back to face him, tears still streaming down her face. She's learning to read, and her favorite books are about dragons. She's shy around new people, but once she trusts you, she talks nonstop. She asks a million questions and wants to know how everything works. Minji's throat tightened, his own eyes burning. Thank you. I'm not saying yes. Diane's voice was firm despite the tears. I'm saying I'll think about it. I'll talk to Lena, prepare her. And if I decide to let you into her life, it will be slow. It will be supervised. And the first moment you hurt her, the first time you choose your position or your mother or anything else over her well-being, I will take her somewhere you'll never find us. Do you understand? I understand. Go home, Minjae. Diane wiped her tears with the back of her hand. Deal with the chaos you just created. Talk to your mother. Talk to your counsel. Figure out what your life looks like now that you've blown it up. And when you're sure, When you're absolutely certain you can handle the consequences of claiming her, call me. She pulled a business card from her pocket, wrote a number on the back, and pressed it into his palm. Her fingers were warm against his skin, there and gone in a heartbeat. Minjae closed his hand around the card like it was something precious. Can I ask you one more thing? Diane looked at him warily, arms crossed. What? Did you ever regret it? Minji's voice was barely above a whisper. Leaving me. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with 5 years of silence and pain. Diane's expression softened, something complicated passing across her face, grief and anger and something that might have been longing. Every single day, she admitted quietly. But I've never regretted protecting our daughter. Minjae nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He turned toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Diane, I never stopped loving you. Not once in 5 years. He left before she could respond, stepping out into the alley where the evening had turned cold. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and he stood there for a moment, the business card clutched in his hand, the weight of what he'd just done settling over him like snow. His phone was exploding with notifications. 17 missed calls from his mother, 9 from Seo-yeon, 12 from his consigliera, messages from the council demanding explanations. His entire carefully constructed world was collapsing, exactly as his mother had warned, and he felt more alive than he had in 5 years. The walk back to his car felt longer than it was. His security chief straightened when he saw Minjae approach, his expression carefully neutral despite the chaos that must be unfolding on their end. Sir, your mother has been calling. I know. Minjae slid into the back seat. Take me home. My apartment, not the family residence. Your mother specifically requested. My apartment. Minji's voice carried the steel that had made him feared across 3 continents. Now, the drive through Seoul's evening traffic gave him time to think, to plan, to prepare for the war he'd just started. Because it would be a war, his mother didn't lose gracefully, and the council had too much invested in the park merger to simply accept his decision. His phone rang again. His mother, persistent as always. This time, he answered. Have you lost your mind? She didn't bother with greetings. Seo-yeon is hysterical. Her father is threatening to pull out of our shipping contracts. The council is calling an emergency meeting. Do you have any idea what you've done? I'm claiming my daughter. Minjae watched Seoul slide by outside the window. All those people living their lives without knowing how fragile everything was. And I'm not marrying Seo-yeon. You foolish, sentimental. His mother's voice rose, control finally shattering. That woman poisoned you 5 years ago, and she's doing it again. This is exactly why I removed her from your life. She makes you weak. No, mother. Minji's voice was calm, certain. You made me weak. You made me a man who couldn't trust his own judgment, who valued appearance over truth, who let the woman he loved walk away because fighting for her was inconvenient. I made you powerful. I made you a leader. You made me miserable. The words came easier than he'd expected, like he'd been holding them in for decades. And I'm done letting you control my life. If you pursue this, if you acknowledge this child, I will have no choice but to bring it before the council. Your position as head of the family will be challenged. Everything you've built was never really mine anyway, was it? Minjae laughed, bitter and free. It was always yours, mother. Your vision, your rules, your empire. I was just the figurehead you could control. You ungrateful. I'll see you at the council meeting. Minjae ended the call, his hands steadier than they'd been all day. His apartment was dark when he arrived, modern and expensive and utterly empty. 48th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city he supposedly controlled. He'd lived here for 3 years, and it had never felt like home. Nothing had felt like home since Diane left. He poured himself a scotch, stood at the window, and made a decision that 5 years ago would have been unthinkable. He called his consigliere, the one man in his organization he trusted completely. "Hyung," he said when the older man answered, "I need you to do something for me. Something that stays between us." "Of course, Minjae. What do you need?" "I need you to investigate my mother. Specifically, I need you to find out the truth about what happened 5 years ago with Diane's supposed corporate espionage." Silence on the other end. Then, carefully, "Are you sure you want to know?" "You knew?" Minji's hand tightened on his glass. "You knew the evidence was fabricated." "I suspected." His consigliere's voice was heavy. "But I had no proof, and your mother was adamant. She said it was necessary to protect the family. Find me proof. Whatever it takes. I need to know exactly what she did. It will take time. And if your mother finds out, let her find out." Minjae drained his scotch. "I'm done being afraid of her." The next 3 days were chaos. The council meeting was brutal. 5 hours of accusations, threats, and thinly veiled power plays. His mother presented her case. He was emotionally compromised, making rash decisions, jeopardizing years of careful planning. 3 council members supported her immediately, but Minjae had spent 12 years building relationships, earning loyalty, proving himself capable. When he laid out his vision for the organization's future, one that didn't require a marriage of convenience, one that diversified their holdings and reduced their dependence on the park's pharmaceutical empire, the room grew quiet. "I have a daughter," he said finally, looking each council member in the eye. "A 4-year-old daughter I didn't know existed because 5 years ago, I let this council and my mother dictate my personal life. I made that mistake once. I won't make it again." "You're asking us to accept an illegitimate child," one of the older members said. "To acknowledge a relationship with a woman who was accused of espionage." "I'm not asking." Minji's voice was steel. "I'm informing you. My daughter exists whether you acknowledge her or not. The only question is whether you're willing to work with me going forward, or whether you want to challenge my leadership." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, his uncle, his father's brother, who'd been on the council since before Minjae was born, spoke up. "Your father once told me that a man who can't protect his family isn't fit to lead one." He looked at Minji's mother. "I think we forgot that lesson somewhere along the way." The vote was 6-4 in Minji's favor. His mother walked out without a word, her back rigid with fury. That night, Minjae sat in his empty apartment and called the number Diane had given him. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Hello." "It's done," he said simply. "The council knows. My mother knows. By tomorrow, every media outlet in Seoul will know. I just wanted you to be prepared." "Minjae," Diane's voice was tight with worry. "Are you okay?" The question surprised him. After everything, after 5 years of silence and pain, she was asking if he was okay. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I'm ready. Ready to face whatever comes. Ready to be Lena's father, if you'll let me." A long pause. "Then, Saturday, 2 o'clock. There's a park near the bakery, the one with the duck pond. We'll be there. I'll be there too. Minjae, don't bring bodyguards. Don't bring expensive gifts. Just bring yourself." Her voice softened. "She doesn't need a mafia boss. She needs a father." Saturday arrived with clear skies and a cold wind. Minjae stood at the entrance to the park, watching families walk by, parents with children, couples holding hands, the mundane beauty of normal life. He'd worn jeans, and a simple jacket. No designer labels. Nothing that screamed wealth or power. He felt naked without his security detail, vulnerable in a way he hadn't felt since childhood. Then he saw them. Diane and Lena walked hand in hand down the path toward the duck pond. Lena wore a purple coat and pink boots, her pigtails bouncing with each step. She was chattering away about something, her hands gesturing animatedly, while Diane listened with patient attention. Minjae's breath caught in his throat. This was his daughter, his child, the most important person in his life, and he barely knew her. Diane spotted him first. She said something to Lena, who looked up, saw Minjae, and went shy, pressing close to her mother's leg the same way she had in the bakery. They approached slowly. Minjae crouched down when they got close, making himself less intimidating, putting himself at Lena's eye level. "Hi," he said softly. "I'm Minjae." Lena peeked at him from behind Diane's leg. "Mommy says you wanted to meet me." "I did. Very much." Minjae's throat was tight. Up close, the resemblance was even more obvious. She had his eyes, his nose, the same stubborn set to her jaw that he saw in the mirror every day. Why? Lena's directness was startling, pure 4-year-old curiosity without guile. Because Minjae glanced up at Diane, who nodded encouragingly. "Because I'm your father, Lena, and I've been away for a long time, but I'd really like to get to know you." Lena considered this, her head tilted to one side, like the prince in Mommy's stories. Minjae felt tears prick his eyes. "Yes, sweetheart, like the prince." "Do you live in a castle?" Despite everything, the chaos, the fear, the uncertainty, Minjae laughed. "Sort of, but it's not as nice as a real castle. Just a tall building." "Can I see it?" "Lena," Diane interjected gently. "Let's take things slow, remember?" "But Mommy." "How about this?" Minjae said, pulling himself together. "How about we go feed the ducks first? And we can talk about castles later." Lena's face lit up. "I have bread." Mommy packed some. The next hour was the best of Minjae's life. They fed the ducks, Lena shrieking with delight when they waddled up to take bread from her hands. She told him about her favorite cartoons, her best friend at preschool, the cat that lived in the alley behind the bakery. She asked him questions. Did he like strawberries? Had he ever seen a real dragon? Could he read? Minjae answered every question, soaking up every detail of her, memorizing the sound of her laugh, the way she scrunched up her nose when she was thinking hard. Diane watched from a bench nearby, her expression unreadable but not hostile. Several times, Minjae caught her wiping her eyes. When Lena ran off to chase pigeons, Diane joined him by the pond. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for this. She deserves to know her father." Diane's voice was soft. "And you deserve to know your daughter. Even if I'm still angry at you. Even if I'm still scared of what this means." "I'm scared too," Minjae admitted. "I've faced rival gangs, police investigations, assassination attempts. Nothing has ever terrified me as much as the possibility of failing her." "Then don't fail her." Diane looked at him, really looked at him. "That's all I'm asking. Just don't fail her." "I won't." The promise felt sacred, binding. "Whatever it takes." Lena came running back, breathless and happy. "Can we get ice cream? Please?" "Minjae, do you like ice cream?" Minjae looked at Diane, who nodded permission. "I love ice cream," he said. "What's your favorite flavor?" "Strawberry." Lena grabbed his hand without hesitation, her small fingers wrapping around his. "Come on." And as they walked toward the ice cream cart, Lena between them chattering away, Minjae felt something shift in his chest. For 12 years, He built an empire through violence and strategy, convinced that power was the only thing that mattered. But this small hand in his, this child who trusted him simply because Diane had said he was safe, this possibility of a different kind of life, this was what actually mattered. This was what he'd been missing. That night, after Diane had taken Lena home and Minjae had returned to his empty apartment, he got a call from his consigliere. "I found it," the older man said without preamble. "Everything. The fabricated security footage, the forged communication records, the payments to the witnesses who claimed to see Diane accessing sensitive files." Minji's hand tightened on his phone. Your mother orchestrated all of it. With help from 2 council members who wanted the park merger to go through 5 years ago. There was never any espionage, Minjae. Diane was innocent the entire time. The confirmation of what Minjae had already known in his heart still hit like a physical blow. His mother had destroyed his marriage, had driven away the woman he loved, had deprived him of 5 years with his daughter, all for a business arrangement. "Send me everything," Minjae said, his voice cold. "Every piece of evidence. Every document. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to make this right." Minjae looked out at Seoul, the city lights spreading out like a carpet of stars. Starting now. The confrontation with his mother happened the next day, in her office at the family headquarters. Minjae laid the evidence out on her desk, page after page of proof that she'd fabricated everything. His mother didn't even try to deny it. "I did what was necessary to protect this family," she said, her voice cold. "That woman was a distraction, a liability. You were making poor decisions because of her. You destroyed my marriage based on lies. I saved your career." His mother stood, her small frame radiating the power she'd wielded for decades. "Everything you have, everything you've built, you have because I made hard choices. Because I wasn't sentimental." "No, you weren't sentimental." Minji's voice was quiet, deadly. "You were cruel and manipulative. And you cost me 5 years with my daughter. That child is my daughter, your granddaughter." Minjae gathered up the papers. "And you will never speak to her. You will never contact her or Diane. You will never involve yourself in my personal life again. You can't dictate." "I'm not dictating. I'm informing you." Minjae met his mother's eyes, and for the first time in his life, he didn't flinch. "You have 2 choices. You can step back from family operations, retire gracefully, and I'll keep this evidence private. Or I can present it to the council and let them decide how to handle a matriarch who falsely accused an innocent woman of espionage." His mother's face went white with rage. "You would destroy me over her?" "No, mother. You destroyed yourself when you chose to betray my trust." Minjae turned toward the door. "You have until tomorrow to decide." He didn't wait for her response. Over the next few months, Minji's life transformed in ways he could never have imagined. His mother chose retirement, disappearing to the family's estate in Jeju. The council accepted his leadership without the park merger, trusting his vision for diversification and legitimate business expansion. And slowly, carefully, he built a relationship with his daughter. Saturday afternoons at the park became routine. Then Wednesday evening dinners at small restaurants where Lena taught him about dinosaurs and unicorns. Then movie nights where Diane would join them. The 3 of them squeezed onto Lena's small couch eating popcorn. Lena started calling him Appa after 2 months. The first time she said it, casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world, Minjae had to excuse himself to cry in the bathroom. With Diane, things were more complicated. They were cordial, cooperative, focused on Lena. But there was still hurt between them, Still 5 years of pain that couldn't be erased by apologies or time. Until one night, 8 months after that first meeting in the bakery, Lena had fallen asleep during movie night, curled up between them. Minjae carefully carried her to her bed while Diane cleaned up the living room. When he came back, Diane was standing at the window, looking out at the Seoul night. "She's happy," Diane said quietly. "Happier than I've seen her. She talks about you constantly. Appa this, Appa that. You're good for her, Minjae. She's good for me." Minjae stood beside her, not too close but close enough to catch her vanilla scent. "She makes me want to be better, to be worthy of her trust." "I never doubted you could be a good father," Diane said. "I only doubted whether you'd choose to be." "I choose her. Every day, every time." Minjae turned to face her. "And I choose you too, if you'll let me." Diane's breath caught. "Minjae, I'm not asking you to forgive me overnight. I'm not asking you to forget what happened." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. "But I'm asking for a chance. A real chance to earn back your trust. To show you that I'm not the man I was 5 years ago." "I'm scared," Diane whispered. "I'm scared to believe you. Scared to trust this. Scared that your mother or the council or something will come between us again. My mother has no power over me anymore. The council knows Lena is my priority." Minjae squeezed her hand gently. "And I promise you, Diane, I swear on our daughter's life, I will never choose anything over you two again." Diane looked at him, really looked at him, searching his face for something. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her, because she stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "One chance," she said. "But if you hurt us again, I won't." He cupped her face with his free hand, his thumb brushing away a tear he hadn't realized was falling. "I can't promise I'll be perfect. I can't promise I won't make mistakes. But I promise I'll fight for us. For all of us." "Then prove it," Diane whispered. "Not with words. With actions. Every single day." "I will." And he kissed her, soft and careful and full of 5 years of regret and hope and desperate, aching love. When they finally pulled apart, Diane was crying and smiling at the same time. "Stay," she said. "Stay the night." "On the couch," she added quickly. "But stay." So he stayed, and he kept staying, on her couch, then in her guest room, then eventually in her life, in all the ways that mattered. It took time, months of proving himself, of showing up, of choosing them over and over again, of family dinners and bedtime stories and bandaging scraped knees, of supporting Diane's bakery expansion and attending Lena's preschool performances and learning to braid hair, of building trust one day at a time. A year after that first meeting in the park, Minjae proposed properly. No expensive ring, no grand gesture, just the three of them having breakfast in the bakery before it opened. "Lena has something she wants to ask you," he said, nudging their daughter forward. Lena, now 5 and fearless, looked up at her mother with serious eyes. "Mommy, Appa wants to know if he can marry you. He says that way we can all be a real family. Can he?" Diane looked at Minjae, tears already streaming down her face. "You taught her that. She helped me practice the speech about 20 times last night." Minjae pulled out a simple gold band. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed wealth, just something beautiful and real. "I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I hurt you in ways I can never fully make right. But I love you, Diane. I loved you 7 years ago. I loved you through 5 years apart, and I'll love you for the rest of my life. If you'll have me. Say yes, Mommy." Lena tugged on her hand. "Please say yes." Diane laughed through her tears. "Yes. Yes, of course yes." They married 3 months later in a small ceremony. Just family and close friends, no politicians or business contacts or media. Lena was the flower girl and stole the show, as she should have. During their first dance, with Lena insisting on dancing between them, Diane whispered in Minjae's ear, "You know you've gone completely soft, right?" The most feared man in Seoul, brought to his knees by a 5-year-old. Minjae looked down at his daughter, then at his wife, and smiled. Best decision I ever made. And it was. Years later, when Lena was grown and had children of her own, she would ask her father about the years before they met, about the empire he'd built, the power he'd wielded, the man he'd been. Minjae would think about that afternoon in the bakery, the moment his entire world had shifted on its axis, the choice that had cost him everything he thought mattered and given him everything that actually did. "I was lost," he would tell her. "And then I found you. And I found my way home." Because that's what Lena and Diane had been all along. Not an obligation or a complication or a problem to solve, but home. The place where he finally learned what real power looked like. Not control, not fear, not manipulation, but love. Pure, simple, terrifying, beautiful love. And it had been worth every sacrifice, every hard choice, every moment of fear. It had been worth everything. The end.